Hi, how are you? You have your ID?
Your cell phone? No, I don't want to give it to you. Why do I have to?
Because my attorney said not to.
Why do I have to give it to you? This is evidence. Evidence.
Do me a favor?
She's under arrest.
I have to go with you. I have to go. I have to do
You don't have no choice.
Let me help you out.
No, I have to stay. Please don't do this. Don't stay. You need to grab the bags. Take the bags. Yeah. And you need to wait outside. Okay.
My husband's almost 80 years old. He can't
Yeah,
come
I
with
can't.
me.
Please, can I go?
No, you can't join me there.
Oh, don't do this, please.
Please.
Oh,
Someone's
God.
got to help him get home. This is terrible. You can't do this. This is insane.
Hold on to that for me.
Is that okay with you?
Please. You don't have that with handcuffs on. She's not going anywhere. Please. Please.
You have anything in your pocket?
No, no.
Do you have anything of value in you?
No,
Plus you have a necklace on. You
Wanna go?
can take
My-
the necklace
I'll
off.
take
Yeah, take it off. Yeah.
And the earrings.
And the earrings. The
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay, how is everybody? Wanted to talk to you today on the 10th year anniversary of Dan Markel's murder. About Dan Markel's murder. Are we any closer to justice? What do we know now that we didn't know 10 years ago about this crime? And what would be considered justice for Dan? And why are we all so fascinated by this case? And what is it all about? What does it touch in us? What are the themes that fascinate us so much about this case and that tell us something about life on planet Earth as we know it? And I was thinking about that. And for one, this is a case. Hold on 1 second, guys. I got to let my cat out. He's going to just sit by the door unless I do. Hold on 1 second. Oh, the glories of being live. So funny, you know. Sometimes he wants to sit right next to me as I do this. Other times he's like, get me out of here. I don't want to have any part of this live stream. So I think, for one, what I was saying is why I think it fascinates us. And I think I was talking with my mother about this morning, and this is an angle that I go over and over again in my mind, and then I'm going to go into a little bit larger themes. But how did a mother and a grandmother think that their grandchildren or their children would not miss, that their needs were so important that their children would not miss their father, that they could just erase him? And I think really that was the plan, to just erase him from planet Earth, erase his memory, get rid of his name, as Wendy Adelson did, replace everything, even the middle names, just remove all traces of him from the planet as much as they could. And that this wouldn't be any kind of hole in their children's lives or their grandchildren's lives. And how they all thought that this was a good idea. And I go back to the planning of this, which I think was done Donna and Harvey Adelson's home with Charlie and Wendy there. I don't think Robert was a part of it. Where they all decided that murder was the best option. And that not even forget the $1 million to pay Dan Markel to bribe. I think I got corrected that it wasn't a bribe. As an incentive, let's call it a financial incentive then, if it's not technically a bribe, is a financial incentive to move to Miami. They weren't going to do that. Then that murder was the best option, and then they would all get away with it. And that brings to this second theme, or the second theme I'm going to talk about. So this is in no particular order of importance, which is this entitled rich family using poor people to break the law and then using their connections to get away with it. So if you don't know, the Adelson family and all these had connections to the Weinstein family who protected them for a while. And the state's attorney, Willie Meigs, who was the state's attorney before Jack Campbell, that's the current state's attorney in Tallahassee, said, we're just going to cut it off. We're going to get so Luis Rivera made a deal. Sigfredo Garcia was found. So Luis Rivera made a deal pretty quickly, 2000, I believe it was 2016. Sigfredo Garcia was convicted in 2019. Katie McBanawa's jury was hung in 2019. She was retried and convicted in 2022. And then Charlie, but it was going to stop right there, right? So just get the little people and don't touch the Adelson family. And this is a element that isn't talked about very much. And I don't know if a lot of people know about their relationship with Michael Weinstein. Hold on one second. Let me share my screen so I can show you what I've was looking at. This is from the Justice for Dan website. Mike, from 2020, Michael Weinstein confirms role as zealous advocate for Charlie Adelson and raises new questions. So Michael Weinstein submitted a formal reply amended to the Florida Politics column describing his relationship with the Adelson family. In this, Weinstein asserted that everything he did was within the law and as his role as an attorney. He was also Charlie Adelson's attorney for a minute and a half. That as assertion does not contradict anything in the column, but there's a lot more to consider. Weinstein's response underestimates the role he played in defending Charles Adelson and his family. Weinstein didn't just file motions and draft press statements. Well beyond that, Weinstein voluntarily appeared on local and major network television shows, presenting himself as a longtime family friend and spokesperson. On ABC's 2020, Weinstein stressed that, quote, the family had no involvement whatsoever in Dan Markel's murder and that Charlie is, quote, a really easygoing, have a beer, relaxed kind of guy, unquote. Doesn't he sound like that? Like an easy, relaxed, have a beer kind of guy on all his jailhouse calls? The guy never stops talking. He sounds so wound up. This whole family was sound very fond of using Xanax because they sounded like all very, they all had weak stomachs. So when they got nervous, like Wendy, Jeffrey Lacasse talks about Wendy getting this like really upset stomach. Charlie Adelson looked like he was turning green and totally pale white as a ghost during his trial. But he's very high strung. I wouldn't call him easygoing or even laid back. I call him lean forward, tightly wound, and a chatterbox, but okay. And that he was a real easygoing, have a beer, relaxed kind of guy that could never engage in such conduct. Weinstein decided to play an important public and personal role in defending his friend. These television appearances were not protected by privilege. What national audiences saw was one man choosing to put his credibility and reputation on the line for another. At the time, the overwhelming evidence of Charlie's lead role in murdering Dan Markel had already been made public by law enforcement, which brings us to that Michael Weinstein's response fails to differentiate between what might matter potential clients and what matters to voters. So he did not dispute his role as a go-between for communications between Charlie, Katie, and Sigfredo. Just Sigfredo's arrest. Attorney to attorney communications are common and perfectly proper, but the impact of these conversations seemed to matter in this case. Weinstein assured Sigfredo Garcia's then lawyer, Jim Lewis, that Charlie and the family wouldn't talk with law enforcement. Lewis then shared this with Katie McBanoa. From there, she and Sigfredo felt safe to avoid cooperating too. And strangely, they both had very expensive defenses. Now, it hasn't been proven that the Adelsons paid for their defense, but I believe, that's my personal belief, that they did pay for their defense. And I know that it was looked into in Katie's case, but very superficially. This is reiterated here only to underscore that Weinstein's early role wasn't trivial. In this very definitional prisoner's dilemma, law enforcement had an uphill battle in eliciting cooperation due to these assurances taking place. Yes, Weinstein was just doing his job, but in this case, that meant that Florida residents had to spend much more time and money to get less justice in this horrific murder case. So, and I want to show you here, that's just some of it. You can read the full thing here. So when he was an HD 81 candidate with deep ties to the Markel family, suspected of murdering Dan Markel. This is Peter Scorch, who's done excellent articles on the Dan Markel's case. A young father was killed, and law enforcement knows how and why. Michael Weinstein, a lifelong friend and sometimes lawyer of Charlie Adelson's, suspected co-conspirator. That's when he was just a suspected co-conspirator and not a convicted co-conspirator murderer. Of Tallahassee law professor Dan Markel announced last week that he's running for HD 81, the seat vacated by Rep. Tina Polsky. Weinstein is the son of Peter Weinstein, a former chief judge. Okay, this is how they did it, the Adelson family. Their connections to Peter Weinstein, and a former state senator who happened to be godfather to Wendy Adelson, Markel's ex-wife. Weinstein appeared on 2020 and other TV programs defending the Adelson family, saying that he was not doing so as their legal counsel, but as a friend. He also represented Charlie Adelson in various minor infractions, such as driving 93 in a 45-mile zone. Wow, Charlie Adelson, that's fast. To be fair, the Weinsteins aren't the only example of political connectedness the Adelson family boast. For example, Charlie Adelson's lawyer, in an unrelated civil case, is the sitting mayor of Coral Springs, Scott Jonathan Brooke. Given the strong case State Attorney Jack Campbell and his team have presented, surely these current and aspiring politicians are aware of the strong evidence relating to Charlie, Wendy, and their parents but are willing to align themselves nonetheless. Who else among Florida's political and legal elite is connected to the Adelson family, praising of them or worse, protecting them? One curiosity relates to the mysterious Tallahassee judge that matriarch Donna Adelson referenced to Charlie Adelson in a May 2006 call captured on a wiretap. Should we do it in the Donna voice? Wendy, and the judge, her boss, are talking. He had some stuff to tell her yesterday because evidently he knows the judge in Tallahassee and he was giving her some information from the murder case. He's been very nice to her. Okay. There are multiple appointed South Florida judges who appear to remain friendly with the family. Maybe they don't know what happened. Maybe they're not guilty by association. They're not guilty by association. But you know what? You know who definitely knows? Michael Weinstein. Weinstein communicated with Jim Lewis, the then attorney for convicted hitman Sigfredo Garcia. We just went over that. And Catherine McManawa. Okay. So that'll give you an idea of some of their close ties. To really powerful people, and they thought that would be enough. So they thought that would protect them, that their wealth would protect them, their connections would protect them, their social status would protect them. And I think that some of our interest is that wealthy, good families like this aren't often seen in this kind of case connected to a murder, because they can't work out a custody. I mean, custody is some of it. Some of it was Dan Markel was threatening to she was threatening Wendy Adelson's legal license, saying that she lied to the court about what she had financially, and that could have threatened her legal license. She could have gotten censured, or at the worst, she could have lost her legal license. So all those things. And that the family, I think also what fascinates us about this is the family is so enmeshed that they felt so entitled, and that to get their way, no matter what it destroyed for anyone else. So selfish. Wendy needed this. Who cares what kind of permanent scars it's going to have on the boys? Who cares about the Markel family? Who cares about all Dan Markel's friends? And he had a lot. And ultimately, instead of erasing Dan Markel, it's just made his legacy stronger. More people know about him. And this brings me to 10 years on, the news is still commemorating his murder with a piece talking to his friends. So let's take a look at that, shall we? So, I mean, Wendy Adelson can get rid of Dan Markel's name, but she can't diminish the impact that he's had, and his spirit still lives on in the people that knew him.
Florida State law professor Dan Markel, 10 years after he was murdered in his Benton Hills home.
He really was kind of a gatherer of people.
I'm Kendall Brandt in the Midtown neighborhood. It's a crime that shook our Tallahassee neighborhoods and the lives of Markel's friends and family back in 2014. 1 decade later, I'm sitting down with a close friend who wants to make sure Markel's memory is not forgotten. Jeremy Cohen says he misses his friend Dan Markel. It's been 10 years since Dan Markel was murdered. Does it feel like it's been 10 years?
I mean, I can remember him like it was yesterday, but now it does seem like it's been a long time since that happened.
He is talking about July 18th, 2014, when two hitmen shot the...
Right, because those are those memories that are really traumatic that implant, that you remember. You may not remember what you were wearing, but you remember the moment you were told, where you were, what you were looking at. It's those really kind of traumatic memories. I think there's even a word for it, but they're really imprinted on your psyche.
FSU law professor in the garage of his home on Trescott Drive.
Definitely didn't believe it at first and had a lot of questions. I called him and left a voicemail. Ended up seeing him in the hospital that night, and sadly, saw him right before he passed.
Cohen and his wife Tracy met Dan through mutual friends and lived down the street.
Our friendship grew as we kind of grew as parents.
Cohen says Dan knew a lot of people throughout Tallahassee.
He really was kind of a gatherer of people. So he liked having Shabbat dinners with people at his house. He often brought people in from all corners of the community.
That's how colleague and friend Jason Solomon also remembers Dan.
Dan was someone who really was big about connecting people, both professionally and personally. And so he really brought together people who were starting their careers as law professors.
Solomon is a part of the group Justice for Dan, pushing for accountability for his death and helping his family get access to their two grandchildren. He says they're doing something to honor him 10 years later.
We launched a Dan Markel Memorial Prize in Criminal Law Theory to honor the future students and scholars who are thinking hard about the purposes of the criminal justice system.
Right. So if you are interested, if you are a criminal law student and want to submit a paper, they are giving out a small stipend and a Dan Markel in Dan Markel's name. And I think there's like 2 points that they suggest that you talk about that were Dan Markel's areas of interest. So that's one thing that they're doing, but that's what everyone says, that he brought people together, that he was really warm, that he was also extremely confident, that he knew his gifts and was eager to share them with people, and his knowledge, and very curious and loved to debate. Also loved that area of the world, the intellectual area of life.
A world of criminal justice that is now working for Markel after his murder. 4 people have been convicted for their role in his death, including his ex-brother-in-law, Charlie Adelson. Local criminal defense attorney Tim Jansen says, "We may not be where we are without the help of a next-door neighbor."
That neighbor identified a car like a Prius. That really helped the FBI locate vehicles in the neighborhood through cameras that fit that description.
Donna Adelson, Markel's ex-mother-in-law, is in jail right now, awaiting trial. Prosecutors say she conspired with her son Charlie to kill Markel. Cohen says he is glad to see the state attorney's office working to get justice for Markel.
We went for a long time without having any answers and knowing anything about who was behind it. So here we are 10 years later.
Right. We're supposed to believe that they all did this on spec. And then and then I think this is what Donna's going to argue too, that they all did this on spec and then came back to extort Charlie Adelson. And Charlie told his mom, and they all tried to work to keep it quiet, but didn't tell law enforcement what they knew. And put Charlie Adelson on a payment plan. That's the greatest part of this wild defense. It's one of the silliest defenses ever created, but it does. I mean, I don't know how else you could tailor all the pieces of evidence. It doesn't work exactly as we found out in Charlie Adelson's trial, because he's texting Katie and saying, "I'm going to the gym. It's a beautiful day." And they're getting closer after she extorts him. But okay. But I don't know if can you guys think of another defense that would be tailored to this evidence?
And 5 people are behind bars. And so, obviously sometimes justice moves slowly, but I'm thankful that it's moved to where we are today.
As friends and family like Cohen still mourn that loss, the legal process is still playing out. Donna Adelson, Markel's ex-mother-in-law, who is charged with his murder, is set to appear in court on Monday. In the Midtown neighborhood, Kendall Brandt, ABC 27.
So what was missing from that report? Thought this was super interesting. Barb Nauman, nice to see you, says the Adelsons would make espresso nervous. Thanks. Yeah. What was missing from that report? Anyone? I'll wait till you guys catch up. We hear Donna. I guess Harvey was missing, but I'm not talking about him. We had all the co-conspirators except one unindicted co-conspirator. Can anyone guess? Wendy was never mentioned in that. I thought it was really interesting that Tim Jansen, who's defended Wendy and said that they'll never be able to try her. Wendy, there you go. Thanks, Mr. C. They'll never be able to try her. And he's a defense attorney in that area. There certainly have been rumors bantered about that he was looking to defend Wendy or Donna one time. He's in that piece, and Wendy Adelson is never mentioned. So it's like Donna just did this. It was like a gift to Wendy without her knowing. Like, we're going to get you a surprise gift. It's not a puppy because, it's not a good thing to get a puppy because, you could return it. Something else. We're going to murder the husband of your children. Oh, you didn't want that? Little hard to take back, right? Hi, Eisenberg. Roberta, the new affidavit today casts severe doubt against the allegations. Karen's team has been saying, thank you, Heisenberg. Yeah, I did look at that. The jurors' affidavit you're talking about, this is in the Karen Reed trial, and has been saying about the jurors, because we all knew that the jurors weren't so dumb that they couldn't figure out the verdict slip, and they were not unanimous on anything. So that's why it was a hung jury. But of course, the defense tried to bamboozle the courts per usual. Thank you, Heisenberg. I'll get to that. One of these days, I'll get back to it. So Wendy's missing from that report, which I think is super interesting. And Tim Jansen's in it, talking about the neighbor at the end. And she remains an unindicted co-conspirator, and no mention of Wendy, no mention of their marital troubles, no mention of their heated, problems with not marital troubles, really divorce troubles, excuse me. And the legal battles that they were in, and how disappointed she was that she had to share custody and remain in Tallahassee, an area that she hated. There's just no mention of it. It's like she's totally ghosted in that whole piece. I thought it was super interesting. And she also drove by the crime scene, for those of you who are new to this case. Just coincidentally right after, and then drove away and said she thought a tree was down. I mean, come on. So it's entitlement. I mean, that's really the theme of this, is entitlement. And it's ultimately very tragic, because the biggest tragedy is the loss of Dan Markel. But it's also tragic for the Adelson family. I'm not saying we should take it as tragic, but if you are Donna or Harvey or Charlie Adelson or Wendy Adelson, is that a family that was so enmeshed and such a unit that they were willing to help pay for this pot of money they were going to give Dan Markel to, each was going to put in a bit, like $333,000. They were all going to make $1 million to make things, to put Wendy where she felt she should be in Miami, and to let Donna have unfettered access to the grandchildren. That the family is now totally broken apart. Charlie's in South Dakota. Harvey Adelson is still in Miami area, from what I've heard. Wendy is moving to Austin. She's not there yet. And Donna Adelson is in Leon County Jail awaiting trial. So what a terrible fate for a family that thought, oh, we just wanted our way. If we could just get Dan Markel this, and they considered him a religious zealot because he was a conservative Jew who kept kosher and one of the kids kept kosher, that everything would be great if they could just get him out of the picture. And where does it end? It ends with Donna getting arrested and possibly convicted for murder, and possibly Wendy getting arrested after Donna and tried. We don't know. Donna may be the end of the line. Wendy may be the end of the line. I know there's some people who think Harvey's the end of the line, but I think Harvey is safe, because otherwise they would have arrested him at the airport when Donna is fleeing to a non-extradition country. So her son gets convicted, and then in a week she and her husband are trying to board a plane to Vietnam, which is a country without an extradition treaty with the United States, meaning it would have been very hard to get her back. Meaning she thought she was next, and she was right. She was picked up at the airport. Can you imagine being so close to getting on that plane, and yet so far you get arrested right there? Kitty's 1993 says, Wendy's attempt to minimize the animosity of the divorce was laughable. Yeah, on the stand. Do you think Donna was the one to suggest the murder for hire? The murder. I don't know. It's Donna or Charlie. I had to be. Donna had to either suggest it or Charlie had to suggest it. And if Donna suggested it and Charlie said, I can get it done, and he got ripped off the first time, is what I've heard. So all these themes of entitlement and money, and it's also, I want to say one more thing about this case. It's also a case of wrong value. So all the things that the Adelsons valued, money, status, right? We know that Donna picked out Dan Markel because of where he went to school. He was Jewish. He had the right credentials. And they did the same for Robert Adelson. They insisted he marry a Jewish woman to disastrous ends. Their values are all in the wrong place. And when you listen to their wiretaps, they're always talking about money and what people have and what they make. And ultimately, how has that helped Charlie Adelson, who's in prison now for the rest of his life? Can help you get a good lawyer, may help you evade justice, but not this time. Didn't work this time. And I don't think it will work with Donna either. Thanks, Hildy, for the super sticker. I appreciate it. Nice to see you. So all these themes were brought up in Georgia Kappelman, prosecutor, in her rebuttal argument. So in Tallahassee, the state goes first, the defense with their closing argument, then the defense, and then the state has a rebuttal because they have the highest burden, meaning they have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. So let's look at this. I just wanted to look at it together. I thought it was interesting. I thought so many of these themes came up and were really well expressed by Georgia Kappelman in her 17-minute rebuttal. Let's take a listen.
The defense has encouraged you to speculate in this case. The law does not allow that. I want to draw your attention to page 4 of your jury instructions. You'll have to pick them up. Page 4, middle of the page. Whenever the words reasonable doubt are used, you must consider the following. A reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt. Could it be? Not good enough. A speculative doubt. Speculation. We don't have that in the courtroom. We don't have that in the jury deliberation room. Imaginary or forced doubt. Not reasonable. Such a doubt must not influence you to return a verdict of not guilty if you have an abiding conviction of guilt. When you're back there and you're thinking about what Mr. Rashbaum would have said, he would have said puzzle pieces. First puzzle piece, the motive doesn't fit because he had a great life and he wouldn't have wanted to ruin his life. The problem with that argument is arrogance. This was not an issue for him because he wasn't going to get caught, because he was untouchable.
Right, and that goes for the whole family. The whole family was arrogant and thought they were untouchable with their connections, their money. Who would think a family would do this? Wasn't going to come back to them.
They said relocation had no impact on Charlie Adelson, and that they proved Wendy's innocence in their questioning of her. Why are they working so hard to convince you Wendy is innocent? Does it matter? Y'all aren't being asked to decide anything about Wendy Adelson. There's nothing on that verdict form about Wendy Adelson. Did she corroborate the defense theory in this case? Wendy Adelson testified she didn't know anything about this supposed extortion of her brother, even though she moved there the day this happened. She didn't know in 14, she didn't know in 15, and she didn't know until it was announced in opening statements in this courtroom. I asked her about it, and she said, quote, well, I learned that someone made that argument. I don't know whether it's true or not. I don't know whether it's true or not. Even his own sister doesn't believe this load he's trying to sell y'all.
So I thought that was one of the best arguments Dan Rashbaum, Charlie Adelson's lawyer, made in his trial, which was this location made no difference to Charlie Adelson. And in a normal family, that would be a good argument. But this family is so enmeshed that, yes, it made no difference to Charlie Adelson whether his sister relocated to Miami. But it meant that he had to endlessly hear Donna Adelson, his mother, moan and groan about it. And in this family, they're all each other's keepers. They're all enmeshed and responsible for each other's happiness. So no, Robert Adelson, the oldest son, no, you can't marry the love of your life. You have to marry a Jewish girl. Otherwise, it will be terrible for the rest of us. So they're living for each other, through each other. It's a serious enmeshment.
Garcia wanted to kill the defendant, so he wouldn't have done a hit on his behalf. And for that, they refer to the jet ski incident. They couldn't be in a conspiracy together because they hated each other. Well, that was part of the purpose of the walling off. The whole theory of this defense is that this defendant was so fearful of Sigfredo Garcia that he couldn't do the normal thing. He couldn't report this. But he continued to date Catherine Magbanua, Garcia's baby mama, after all this. After July 1, when they had this incident in the roadway. After the extortion. And even after that, he continues to send love notes to Sigfredo Garcia's woman. Even after the two of them get back together, he's still sending those notes because he's so arrogant.
Does anyone read lips there? Does anyone read lips? He's shaking his head. Georgia Kappelman's closing argument and rebuttal. Everything about Georgia Kappelman, because she's so successfully prosecuted Charlie Adelson, just drove him crazy if you listen to his jailhouse calls. And he said, oh, she's putting in y'alls. She's reducing everything down to a 5th grade level here. But she's got his number here. He's arrogant, and it was ridiculous to think that you'd get closer to your extortionist after she extorts you, right? Katie Magbanua. And through this, he's shaking his head. He's making faces. His lawyers looks like not Dan Rashbaum, the other female lawyer. I forget her name right now. Help me out if you remember. Is telling him, like, I think she was telling him to settle down. But he read the jury very well. He knew he was cooked. They convicted him in less than 2.5 hours.
This has told you that the defendant made the joke about the TV being cheaper than Hitman to people he hardly knew. Who are those people? The only person that testified in this courtroom that they had heard that joke was Wendy Eggleston. Lacasse was asked. The lawyer said they said it, but and you guys have to refer to your notes and your own memories about what the evidence showed. But Lacasse was asked, did he say the joke at the dinner that y'all went to with Wendy and Garcia and Catherine Magbanua? I'm sorry, Wendy and Charlie and Catherine Magbanua. And he says, no. He does not recall that joke being made, and he thinks he would have recalled it had it been made. So there is no evidence in this trial that the defendant told that joke to people he hardly knew. If this was a murder for hire, it should have been paid in advance. Murder for hires always get paid in advance. That's what Pat Sanford said. That's not what he said. What Pat Sanford said is the arrests have been made close in time after the other murder for hire cases have worked. So there's no payment over time, gifts and stuff like that. Here, the investigation took years for the defendant to have the opportunity to try to keep her happy, to try to provide these gifts, not only to her, but to Sigfredo Garcia, a gift card for a vacation on your extortion victim. Offered, not asked for, not demanded, offered to the extortionist. The defense talked about Catherine Magbanua. He hates when people lie, and she's a liar, and she lied to you. Well, Mr. Rashbaum's opinion about the witnesses, he told you which ones were good, which ones were lying, which ones were truthful, which ones were the best ones, which ones meant nothing. You guys decide that stuff. Okay, what we say is not evidence. Catherine Magbanua is a liar, though. I mean, she said other stuff, and now she's saying this. You guys have to consider that. That's a no-brainer. She has played every card she had, and this is the last stop for her. I agree with that. You guys agreed at jury selection that you would keep an open mind to that type of evidence, and that's all I ask you to do. Does it fit with the other evidence in the case? Because her last testimony sure didn't.
Right. So Georgia Kappelman is wisely meeting the weakest part of her case head on. And I thought that Katie McBanowa was an excellent witness. Everybody said on court TV, all the talking heads, Law and Crime, oh, it's going to bring the case down. She said something else under oath. Yeah, when she thought she had a chance of getting out of it, when she had mega bucks, somehow behind her defense, she lied. Now that all that's been pulled away, she's got a court-appointed attorney. Suddenly, yeah, the state was right all along. They certainly were right about Sigfredo. And yeah, I was the middle woman. I wasn't extorting Charlie Adelson. And what Georgia Kappelman is saying there, you agreed in the beginning. She's saying, when I voir dired you, meaning when I asked you, when I went through the jury pool and picked out jurors, I picked out jurors that could understand or maybe take into consideration that someone might have lied under oath and now has a different story without totally throwing out the evidence and saying this case is ridiculous, walking away, not proven not proven beyond a reasonable doubt. I have a doubt because this woman is a liar and this doubt is reasonable, even though it fits in with all the rest of the evidence. Really well done. Well finessed by Georgia Kappelman there.
Nobody has stronger feelings about Catherine McBanowa than the ones sitting on this side. Would I ask you to base this defendant's freedom on the word of Catherine McBanowa? That's what they said I'm doing. And I would never do that. Never. Does it fit with the other evidence in the case? That's what I'm asking you to consider. I didn't ask her about Dolce Vita. She verified the transcript. She said the words that scrolled when y'all watched it were the words that were said. The state has a doubt. What if we do? It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what the lawyers think. Doesn't matter. Do you have a doubt? Doesn't matter what I think. Doesn't matter what Mr. Rachbaum thinks. Regarding the defendant's demeanor in 2014, the defense said there was nobody that said anything about his demeanor. We only asked about, was he going crazy after the bump? And the answer was yes. That's not true. Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was his best friend in 2014, they didn't fall out until 2015, reported no change in his behavior. I said, was his behavior weird like that before the bump? No, not weird. That was his quote. He was normal until the bump, and then he was agitated, angry, freaked out, tense, stressed, whatever.
This is so funny because Charlie Adelson says on the wiretaps, I only talked to Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's supposed to be my best friend. I only have 2 text messages from him in 2014. Maybe because Charlie Adelson was busy getting a murder for hire going. But of course, so let's just say if he was nervous from 2014 on, that would still be bad. He's like, there was no change. Basically saying he didn't know me well enough to know what my demeanor was. But he was around in 2016 and suddenly he noticed a sharp change in demeanor. Does it have to go all the way back to 2014 to be a sharp change? How close does he have to be? It's just so funny. Charlie Adelson, proved on the stand that he was not his best advocate. He came off as arrogant, cocky, had an answer for everything, and didn't have a good answer for everything, a believable answer for everything. So having an answer, it was almost seemed like he had rehearsed his cross-examination with Daniel Rachbaum many, many times over. And Wendy Adelson helped convict her brother by lying on the stand, giving unbelievable answers that may have protected her. It didn't matter. She had immunity. That takes quite some confidence to lie when you have immunity on the stand, but she sure did. Made up stories about the banana bread, that they were in great. Donna and Dan Markel were in great, had a great relationship at the end, and Donna made him banana bread. Remember that? We never heard, that's the first time we heard that story, Charlie Adelson's trial.
Why didn't I play all of the calls? Did y'all get enough of the calls? It's trying to pick the parts that I think are important. They're in evidence. Feel free to listen to them. I do not want you to think I was trying to hide anything from you. Those are in evidence. And you will have an opportunity to review anything you want when you're back there with the recording equipment, headphones, and all that will be provided to you. The defense says in calls A, B, and C, if you did a murder with someone, wouldn't it be the first thing on your mind to report? Well, maybe, but you're probably not like Charlie is. You're probably not untouchable. Charlie Adelson asks the description on the wire, tell me about this guy, what's the timing, what was he wearing a disguise? How do those questions, the defense is offering that as evidence that he was trying to deduce whether this blackmailer was the same as the prior blackmailer, but he never saw the prior blackmailer. He only saw Catherine Magbanua. So how does asking if the guy that approached his mother was wearing a disguise tend to prove his innocence or tend to prove his extortion theory? The guy that extorted him wasn't wearing a floppy hat and an Abe Lincoln beard. It was Sigfredo Garcia. It was Catherine Magbanua. Sigfredo Garcia, the first extortionist, didn't give him 48 hours to pay. He put him on a payment plan. He paid over years. The defendant, hoping it's the police, and saying, quote, these people only know part of the story, or they think they know part of the story. The defense picks that out and says, oh, there he is talking about the first extortion. Or is he saying, why did they go to my mom instead of me? I'm the one that has a connection to you. I'm the one that, I think what he says is, I'm the one that has a relationship to you. Why didn't they come to the one that's involved? I mean, I'm not involved. That's what he says. Why didn't they come to the one that was involved in this? That's what he's trying to figure out.
Right. And he says it. I love his doublespeak. I mean, I'm not involved, right? This is the underwire. Excuse me. I'm not involved, but I'm involved. I'm not involved if anyone's listening, but I'm involved. I'm the one with the relationship. I mean, Charlie Adelson, I've just been listening to a lot of his jailhouse calls again, and it's interesting with his family, and they're all devastated. They all really thought he was going to get off, including Charlie Adelson. He was giving away his food, and Donna's weeping and putting money in his commissary, which is so weird to think that in a week she's going to be arrested and people are going to be putting money in her commissary. It's so bizarre to listen to. But in those jailhouse calls, what Charlie Adelson says is that I was never going to get a fair trial in Tallahassee. It was never going to be fair for me. And I think he talks to one female friend who's like, could you move it to like Ohio or Washington, some state far off, and you'll get a fair trial there. Hey, I have news for Charlie Adelson. No matter where you are, you're going to get convicted with this evidence, with Luis Rivera, Katie Magbanua, your sister, the underwire, the bump, La Dolce Vita tapes. You're getting convicted. You did it. You ran your mouth. You thought you were slick, and you're not as slick as you thought you were. You're see-through. And I think that's also what bothers him about this closing, is that Georgia Cappleman nailed his personality, nailed the key issues in this case. Entitlement, arrogance, using wealth for status and power. Get what you want. Our connections will keep us safe. We're untouchable. We're the Adelson family. Didn't work out like that.
About why they went to his mom and not him. Can't even read my own writing here. Oh, the PowerPoint with Wendy. Okay, the dots on the cell phone PowerPoints do not indicate where the person was. They indicate the cell tower that was servicing the person's phone at that time. So they're going to be somewhere around there. And the testimony was that Wendy's dot at 12:30 could be consistent. He can't say where she was. Could be consistent with her being at Trescott. And we know she went to Trescott because Officer Brin observed her there. So I'm not desperately trying to pound a puzzle piece into y'all that Wendy made the call to say it's done. I don't know that. I can't prove that. If that information was conveyed, I don't know how it got conveyed. All right, Lacoste. They really need y'all to discount the testimony of Jeffrey Lacoste, right? Because of that statement that Wendy made to him just before the murder, that all kidding aside, her brother really had looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel. And the defense says, you can't believe him, he's a jilted lover. And the evidence definitely showed that he was heartbroken over Wendy Adelson. But unfortunately for the defense, his brain was working just fine. And he testified about Charlie Adelson bragging in the hot tub about connections to a Cuban criminal element. The defense says, oh, they're not Cuban, that's not in evidence. They're of Hispanic descent, and he reported that to law enforcement, that that's what Charlie said. Lacoste doesn't know if they're Cuban or something else. Lacoste said he bragged in the hot tub about having connections to a Cuban criminal element, and when Lacoste reported that information, the killers had not been identified, so he had no way of knowing if they were Cuban or of Hispanic descent. That's the importance of that. Lacoste says Wendy reported the celebration dinner, same thing. He comes in and tells the cops, look, she reported a celebration dinner to me or she vomited on the table. An inspection of the records proves there was a dinner and she did vomit. But they want you to believe that Lacoste is just lying about the celebration part. The Halloween text, they've asked you to look at.
I mean, how cruel is that they all go out for a dinner? So was it to celebrate Harvey's birthday? Yeah, probably. But also the big gift was that there was going to be no more religious zealot. That's what they call Dan Markel. No more problems for Wendy. Wendy was free to go where she wanted. And now she had total power and control over her children. And that's something, a big theme with Donna, power and control. I decide how these kids are going to be raised. I decide what they eat. And there was all these issues of her food and her spork in jail. It's all about control with Donna. But what kind of family would celebrate a murder? It blows your mind, doesn't it? Thank you, Hildy, for the super sticker. Appreciate it. But what an awesome rebuttal argument, huh? We're almost at the end.
Their piece of evidence that talks about when Garcia learned about the existence of Charlie. That doesn't shed any light on what we're saying occurred on Halloween. On Halloween, Charlie, this defendant, approached Catherine Magdanoa about, do you know anyone that can rough him up? Okay, we're not alleging that she called Garcia that day and said, hey, can you come kill somebody? That was just the first inquiry into a plan that developed over time between Charles Adelson and Catherine Magdanoa. All right, the defense mentioned Erica, and all this time. Erica Johnson and her testimony, that didn't mean anything. Why did they call them? What about that recorded call between the defendant and Erica? Why does he tell her not to talk to the police? What about June and Chinda? Why does he tell her not to talk to the police? They don't know about the first layer of extortion. They can't reveal the first layer of extortion that will reveal the second layer of extortion that will expose him to the Latin kings. Why is he telling them not to talk to the cops? Defendant's testimony. They say it's reasonable that he didn't go to the police with the truth because he had just seen what these people were capable of. They killed Dan Markel. He was in fear. Okay. Is that consistent with what you know about him? I refer you back to the wires and everything you know about him. But also, why then not come forward with this story when the bad guys were arrested and the danger was eliminated? Why not come forward when Catherine Magdanoa was arrested and he believed her to be innocent? For 3 years, she awaited trial while this man thought she had nothing to do with it, according to him. Yet, he did not come forward with this story. Why not come forward after her conviction? All the bad guys have been arrested and convicted. Danger eliminated. Come tell the truth. He doesn't do it. What about after his own arrest? He doesn't come forward then. We learn it in this courtroom in opening statement. Defense says the defendant freaked out in the car before Dolce Vita. You have to watch Dolce again and see if you think he was freaking out or if he was in control of that situation. He was the one giving orders in that situation.
Right. There's Georgia mentioning control again. Charlie's in control. He's the maestro. He's calling the shots. There's no more calling the shots. And it's really interesting to listen to his jail calls. He talks about his conditions being, they think that anytime you're convicted of murder, they put you on watch in case you want to end it all. And he's describing the conditions, how terrible they are, so to elicit sympathy. And then he whines on and on and on about how it wasn't a fair trial, how the jurors were so bad, even with his $1 million juror consultant, Josh Dubin, the Innocence Project liaison, who did what I considered a really dishonest and manipulative voir dire of the jury. I thought it was crazy, but okay. That they still couldn't get a fair jury. That this was such a big case. So I think he's also proud that it's like a big case. This is the biggest case Tallahassee had ever seen. People wanted to get on this jury. So he's also bragging a little bit that he can't, but just more pity, pity, pity. Talkathon, me-a-thon, Charlie Adelson. It's so bad for me. It's so bad for me. But nobody's curious at the time what happened to Dan Markel. Nobody wanted to tell the police what they knew. Wendy wanted to do one police interview and then everybody lawyered up in the Adelson family and never talked again. Does that seem normal?
I'll go back to the players in this case being smart. I mean, the defendant is smart. And they had over a year to carefully plan this murder with the goal of not getting caught. And he's had 7 years to think about his defense in this case since the case first broke. And he does think he's untouchable. Don't guess. Don't assume. Look at the evidence. It will tell you everything you need to know. But don't let the way the defendant thought he would get away with this be the reason he gets away with it. As long as you keep your mouth shut, you can get away with murder. Well, fortunately for us, the defendant didn't take his own advice. He did take the witness stand. He did offer statements, and you are able to assess his credibility as part of your determination of this case. Only one of us is putting on a magic show. It's up to y'all to figure out which one it is, right? We just hope and trust that you all have the common sense and the courage to see this case for what it is, to cut through all the stuff that the lawyers say and get to the meat of it and render a verdict that does justice for Dan Markel. And that is a verdict of guilty as charged. Thank you.
So another thing that Charlie Adelson objected to was her folksiness, her y'alls. And it's interesting. Another thing that came up on the wiretap was that Dan Rashbaum helped Charlie Adelson get kind of that protective custody, which is probably the reason he was moved. Talks about getting into a program like that police officers get into where they watch you in prison and make sure, because he's a high profile case. And the news talked about another high profile case that had to be moved, just like Charlie Adelson's case, because of death threats. So I'm not really, I've said this in my Patreon episode about it, I'm really just not buying this idea that they were so offended by his defense. I think that it was something that was pushed out by Dan Rashbaum because to STS, and it just sort of went around. I don't believe that I just think that he would be a very difficult person in prison to get along with. He talks a lot. He's very selfish. He's insufferable, hard to listen to. He just talks and talks and talks endlessly about himself. He doesn't care about other people. And prison is not unlike any other community, high school. You have to have some charms. And I understand that Charlie Adelson can be charming, but not enough. Not enough. They know he has money, and he had to be moved to South Dakota to keep him safe. So Monday, Donna has a hearing. The Society page is going to be streaming it with Katie Kool-Aid at 1 p.m. Eastern time. I will be over there in the chat. Come meet me over at the Society page. Thank you, mods. Thank you, Tommy. Murder by Maestro Society page for moderating my chat. I will be over there Monday hanging out watching Donna. It's a status hearing for her trial, pre-trial hearing. Let's hear I would think that we're going to see a lot of the familiar players. Luis Rivera, Katie, Magbanoa, not in Monday's hearing, but in her trial as witnesses. Charlie Adelson may be an addition, and possibly Robert Adelson. I've reported on that recently, that they're on the witness list. But if I had to know anything, what I would want to know is how they're going to get rid of the Castigar issues in Wendy's case. If Jack Campbell and what he told Patty from Patty's Playhouse is right, that she's next. She's in Georgia's crosshairs next after Donna, how they're going to get rid of the Castigar issues. I mean, they're really complicated legal issues, way above my head. I'm just going to finish this episode the way I do so many episodes, especially today. This is a day to remember Dan Markel with a victim impact statement. This one is from Ethan Lieb, and it starts out, Your Honor, Dan Markel was my friend and colleague, and I still can't figure out how to be whole without him. He was present and intuitive and loving and nudging. He found time for me and our relationship in the most creative manner and performed friendship in ways that always felt genuine and from the right place. Although I literally wrote a book about friendship, I have always been chastened to know that he knew more about it than I ever would or could. I've gone from intimidated by Dan when I first met him to wholly admiring in short order, but now I have to remain in a permanent state of grieving. I feel cheated because our friendship is now stuck in time. There was so much growing to do together, and I miss his companionship so much. He is still teaching me and reaching from beyond the grave. I can reread him, think about what he would say about personal or professional challenges, conjure his goodwill. In these small ways, he lives on, and I take comfort that his vivacity in life left reverberations in death. But I am in mourning still. My life at work and at home is thinner, less vital, less analyzed, and less shared. I miss my friend, Ethan. That's what I have for today. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this episode. I'll meet you back here tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. Have a great night, everybody.